Jake, you know what really bothers me, man?
What?
Climate change.
Yeah, it's a loaded subject, man. I'd rather not talk about it, alright?
Yeah, I guess that's true. But Jake,
What?
well, dude, hear me out. A lot of people are talking about the subject of climate change, but no one is really talking about how to actually communicate about this subject.
Yeah, you got a good point. Maybe if we learn how to effectively communicate the issue, we'll see a lot more progress in addressing the problem.
Yeah, maybe.
Alright, before we even talk about climate change, the first thing we have to do is define what a mental model is.
A mental model is a person's thought process for how something works. Everyone has some sort of relevant knowledge for most topics.
But people tend to use their prior knowledge and beliefs to form a filter that selectively absorbs the information that goes along with their mental model.
Here's an example of two guys having an argument and heavily relying on their mental models.
Suppose we have two people arguing over a pair of headphones. Person A and person B.
Hey man, see these headphones? They're the best for music.
Are you kidding me, dude? Those are trash. These headphones are 10 times better for listening to music.
Oh yeah?
Yeah!
Well, mine are smaller and therefore more portable than yours, so that makes them better.
Well, I'm sorry, what'd you say? I can't hear you. These are noise canceling. In the conversation that just happened, nothing was accomplished. It was full of confirmation bias. We both expressed strong preference for our existing mental models.
I liked my headphones and gave my reasons why, and Jake did the same. We both picked information that made our arguments seem valid, and then disregarded all other information that didn't coincide with our mental models.
In relevance to climate change, people often form strong opinions based on what they've seen or heard, only taking in information that supports their mental model.
That kind of reminds me of something.
Of national attention. And in case we have forgotten, because we keep hearing that 2014 has been the warmest year on record, I asked the chair, you know what this is? It's a snowball. And that's just from outside here. So it's very, very cold out, very unseasonal. So here, Mr. President, catch this.
Here we see the senator use a false mental model. He thinks that just because it's cold and snowy outside, that climate change can't be happening. Climate change is a long-term trend and not a single weather event.
But people tend to ignore concepts like that, especially if the concept devalues their opinion. People would much rather reference things that in their mind supports their argument. So how does one effectively communicate with someone who is stuck to their mental model?
Well, the first thing to know is that mental models are not static. This means that one has the ability to update them as they see fit. The trick is to find ways to help that process happen, which don't include blatant attacks on one's mental model.
Framing, limiting emotional appeals, and addressing climate change uncertainties are all methods that one should use when they're communicating with someone about climate change.
Framing is the setting of an issue within appropriate context to achieve a desired interpretation of perspective.
It can help communicate why something might be a problem and who or what might be causing it.
The first step to properly frame climate change is to determine your audience's mental model of the subject.
Next, you'll want to consider the audience's membership to certain subcultures. This will allow you to determine what negative aspects of climate change you want to talk about in order to grab their attention. Tying the negative aspects of climate change to a person's home forces them to care.
For instance, if you're talking to someone from Colorado, an appropriate frame would be,
Hey man, did you hear about the hurricane that hit last week? It caused so much damage down south. And now with climate change, scientists are saying that they could increase in frequency. Isn't that kind of scary?
man, I don't really care about that too much. As long as there's snow on the slopes, that's good enough for me.
Well, are you aware of the fact that with climate change comes increasing global temperatures on average, which will result in you having a shorter ski season?
Wait, dude, are you serious? Skiing's everything to me. We need to stop this right away.
Alright, so let's break down what we just saw. At the beginning of the video, I used incorrect framing because I talked about hurricanes, which has nothing to do with someone who lives in Colorado. But then when I talked about the ski season, I framed it correctly because it was relevant to where he lived.
Next, let's talk about limiting emotional appeals.
People have a capacity for how many issues they can worry about at once. This is described as the finite pool of worry.
As a result, the human mind filters its pool of worry and pays more attention to threats that are likely to occur in the immediate future.
Another thing is people can become emotionally numbed if they are exposed to too many emotionally draining situations at once. Here's an example.
How's it going, man?
Yo, I just got back from my climate change class and I heard some stuff.
What'd you hear?
Well, for starters, the ice caps are melting, polar bears are dying, my family's gonna have to relocate because we live on the coast, global temperatures are at an all-time high, everyone's gonna die.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping.
To avoid emotionally numbing discussions about climate change, balance information that triggers emotional response with scientific knowledge to leave a mark in more than one place in the brain.
Also, acknowledge that the audience has other pressing issues to worry about besides climate change, such as war and natural disasters.
Another thing to keep in mind when discussing climate change is that many people feel that there are a lot of climate change uncertainties.
In response to uncertain situations, people tend to only do one thing to lessen their sense of worry. This is called single action bias.
Here's an example of this.
I'm really worried about the adverse effects of climate change. That's why I recycle.
In this example, Adam thought that just because he recycles, he was doing his part to reduce the effects of climate change. While this is helpful, there is still much more he can do to combat climate change. This is something that is important to communicate when having discussions about the subject.
Limit one's uncertainty about climate change. Help audiences understand what is known and what is relatively poorly understood with a degree of confidence.
For example, people often think that scientists are widely divided when it comes to climate change existence. Such an uncertainty can make people very divided when they think about whether climate change is real. So in a conversation, remind them that 97% of scientists agree that climate change is currently happening. We hope you found this video useful.
We believe that more effective communication on climate change will result in more people being on the same page. If more people work together, the problem of climate change can be solved.